Hi there, I'm Andy Looney, and I'm here to tell you the whole history of Looney pyramids. The story begins in the ancient civilizations on the planet Mars 100,000 years ago. Seen here in a painting done in 1991 by Dawn Petrolik. We're here in my office at Looney Labs, where I also have the original steel mold that we made Looney pyramids in from 1999 until 2011, when we started having them made overseas. Well, we're going to take a look at the whole history, and the story begins when I started writing short stories in 1987 and publishing them in these homemade books that I would create. See, we didn't have the internet back then, so the only way to promote things like this was to create our own little publications. And so I wrote a story called Ice House in 1987, which described a non-existent board game, and everybody got so interested in this imaginary board game, they wanted me to make a real version of it. I didn't know how to make a game like that, but I made these. The very first set here, which is lead fishing weights, prototype number 1, in 1987. I couldn't figure out how to make a game, so I just kept writing my little stories. And another way I would send them out was as postcards. See, I would make little serialized versions of my short stories, and I would send them out to everybody one part at a time over the course of days. And one of these stories was called The Children of Mars, and it again described this imaginary pyramid system that everybody wanted to try playing. So a friend of mine named John Montree created this prototype set number 2, and said, come on, make a game using these pyramids. Here's a set of pyramids like the one you described. And again, I tried to figure out how to make a game, and again, I was stumped. But my very good friend John Cooper, shown here in a photo around the same time, he got really intrigued by my ideas, and he figured out how to make a game that played like the one I described. And suddenly we had a game that worked like the one I described. And so here's the very first version of the rules that we started saying, hey, can you read these rules and tell us if you can understand how to play this game? And so we got some friends of mine from work together, and we tried playtesting them. And here's a photo of my whole team at work back in those days. And there I am. And here's Kristen Wonderlic, who I would later marry and start Looney Labs with. And we worked for this guy named Jim Chesney. And this was actually the first project we ever did together, was making these t-shirts for everybody in the group that said, our fearless leader, and had a picture of our boss on it. So she got really excited about these pyramids that I showed her. And she made the third set. This is the third set here, prototype number 3, made in 1988 by Kristen out of Sculpey that baked hard in the oven. And so we got excited about this, and we started having tournaments and events like here. This is actually a postcard advertising the very first Ice House tournament in 1989. And we would hold tournaments to get interest in the games, including like here, this is a t-shirt from the 4th tournament. And so we would have these tournaments at science fiction conventions and build up interest in the game that way. And in 1989, we actually started a little company and made the first 100 game sets. And here's number 3 of 100 of those first 100 game sets. And as you can see, it came with 3 rule booklets, well, a rule booklet and 2 other booklets, one that had the short stories that originally inspired it. And here are the pieces. They were solid because we didn't have the idea of stacking in those days, and we just wanted them to be hefty and solid. And look how beautiful this first of those sets was. So we made these 100 sets, and everybody bought them real fast, and then we didn't know what to do because it was so much trouble to make the first 100 sets that we were struggling with how to get pieces made. And after a while, well, we made a few other specialty sets, like this one here with beautiful glitter pieces, but these were all made by hand using poured plastic in our garage. Actually, in my apartment originally. We almost got kicked out. Anyway, we just had to scrap all that. So the next thing we started doing was paper. So see here, paper Ice House. It would use these. We'd actually punch out and fold together one of these little pyramid pieces, and with that you could actually make a pretty serviceable set, especially if you filled them with aquarium gravel and glued them like this set you see here. So the second way we made pyramids was, as I say, paper Ice House pieces, and for a couple of years that was the only way you could get them. But then we made the third set with wood pieces. We got a company in Chicago to cut a set for us, and we had to figure out how to stain them ourselves using actually leather dyes. But we sold these in a drawstring bag, And the packaging was very simple. We just used a shipping box and we put an Ice House label right on the front there. And it included, by now the rule book was really quite comprehensive, with a lot of detail about all the ways you could play it, a complete sample game at the back. And we also included a whole little first edition print of the novel that started the whole thing, The Empty City, with the stories that inspired the whole game set. Again, we didn't have the internet, so another thing we would start doing to promote ourselves was we made a little newsletter called Hypothermia. And so in 1990 and for the next few years, every now and then we'd send out one of these little newsletters we made to our friends. And in 1996, we started inventing other games for the Pyramids. So one of these issues of Hypothermia actually came with a little booklet called More Ice House Games. And this had rules for 5 other games you could play, the first other games for the system. And the idea was you could lay it flat, and this was a board for one of the games, a game called Trice. Actually, it's not really that great of a game, but it was very important to me as a game designer to get that next game designed. So in 1996, the other thing I invented was this little card game here called Flux. And Flux gave us the financial success necessary to be able to invest in the expense of that mold I showed you, which we used finally to make beautiful injection molded plastic pyramids like these that we now sell. And so we then made a new version of the system that came in this clear plastic box with 4 different games, 3 rule books shown here with 4 different games. And we thought it was so cool because you could see the pyramids through it, but at the same time this plastic box kept cracking and people complained about it. So this system didn't last all that long, but it was still very successful. In fact, it won the Origins Award for Best Board Game of the Year that year. So that was the next version. That's the 4th major version. All right. Now, we also made the first expansion shortly after this one that had brought out 2 new colors. The first, beyond red, yellow, blue, and green, were black and clear. And that also came with a chessboard bandana that Allison designed and a drawstring bag that you could carry your whole system around in. And a promise of another game that was coming out that I finally invented called Black Ice. That took actually a while. But again, the pyramid system, the tubes kept cracking and we wanted yet more colors. So the next thing we did was we put them into these clear tubes, and it became an a la carte color thing that you could mix and match the colors that you wanted. We had all the colors of the rainbow available, and you could buy them by the colored stash and build the set that you wanted that way. And we also brought out, by now, we had 12 games that we wanted to showcase. And we put out a whole book called Playing with Pyramids with details on how to play all 12 of those games. And we also brought out a beautiful new edition of The Empty City, complete with beautiful drawings by Allison that had illustrations for the various scenes in the game, including the whole story of the Martian backstory of the pyramids. And how they came, again, the idea that the system started on Mars 100,000 years ago. That goes through a lot of these different games, including Martian chess. Another thing we did around then was giant pyramids. This is a medium. These were done where we would take cardboard like this, big sets, and we could run around the room playing a giant game of Ice Towers. This was a whole lot of fun. We should make these again someday. Maybe someday, not yet. All right, so this was version 5, I like to call it. But people wanted just one game in a box set, so we decided to try a couple of different editions of that. We brought out a box set of Zendo in 2003, along with a box set of Ice Towers. And this one actually introduced the 10th colors of cyan. And this included a copy of the original novel as well, since it doesn't really need many other pieces. And a little packet of rules called the Ice 7 cards were in both of those. But those didn't do as well as we'd hoped, and we were needing to refocus on our things on other, like Flux was really taking it off. We had to focus on the business on other things. So, and there was sort of confusion about all the different colors. So what we did at that point was we collapsed the whole thing down into just 2 products. I created a new game called Treehouse, and Treehouse was a game that I could include a whole complete game in this one little tube, and this is a more flexible tube, so it wouldn't crack like the other one. And it included a little rule sheet in here with the rules for the game Treehouse on a tiny little folded sheet. And it also introduced the Treehouse die for the first time, which became a tool used in a number of different pyramid games. So Treehouse brought our SKUs down to exactly 2 by having a complete game in a tube with the 2 different color schemes. You could still get all the pyramids you needed to play any of the different games in the system just by putting together tubes of treehouse in a group like that. So in fact, we called 3 treehouse sets was a 3-house set, and we had a little booklet with 3 different rules for 3 sets like that, 3-house. We brought that out shortly after the treehouse revolution, along with a new game called Martian Coasters that used the treehouse set. And the World War V was yet another game that used the 3-house concept. But that was still kind of confusing and not that successful either. So we decided to switch to these beautiful bagged sets that would have a complete game and everything you needed inside this clever zippered pyramid-shaped bag. And we switched to selling the pyramids themselves for expansions just in boxes that fit along with the rest of the Looney Labs product line. We also did a special version of Treehouse in pink pyramids that brought out the new pink color at that time. And by then we had the next version of the rules was Pyramid Primer number 1. But that's all what I call System 8, and now that's part of the past, as it were, because we're switching over to the extremely exciting Pyramid Arcade set. And that brings you up to the minute with the history of the Looney Pyramid.